Hello Kindred Longevity Lifestyle Designers. This is Govin here with secretsoflongevity.com. I'm sitting out here enjoying the sun on this Saturday before Easter Sunday and wanted to do this intro for some more video clips of the Bitcoin conference I was at last weekend. And as always, I want to hear what your thoughts are in the comments below. This series, as you can see from the title, is obviously about more of the future prospects that a lot of these top-level speakers within the Bitcoin community that were at the conference envision as coming about. And I think it's important to hear these ideas and these perspectives, because a lot of people dismiss this whole idea of cryptocurrencies, altcurrencies, and Bitcoin on the basis that what they've seen in the media shows that it's falling by the wayside. And there's so much more that's going on behind the scenes that gives a very strong incentive to follow it more closely, perhaps get involved in some way. I acknowledge that there's going to be some role that this technology plays in the future of the internet and people's interaction and the economy, etc. So here are the clips.
My general thesis, I've been saying this since the beginning, is that we're at about the 1993-94 stage of Bitcoin development versus the internet, and there's still a Google out there somewhere, right? But you couldn't have Google until you had Netscape. And you couldn't have Netscape until Cisco laid the pipes. And we're somewhere between Cisco laying the pipes in terms of the hardware, the mining, the security of wallets, and the Netscape, which I guess would sort of probably be the wallets and some of the other infrastructure. Once you have the infrastructure, then all of a sudden innovation, we believe, will flourish in what I've been calling the BitCommerce space.
In my opinion, like being at this conference, this sort of a conference, 2, 3, 4 years from now, will be thousands of people. It'll be a lot like how the internet felt around 1998, 99, when it started. Everyone started to catch on to it, and there's going to be massive amounts of money made.
Generally, our investment thesis has centered around 2/3 to 3/4 of our dollar goes into Bitcoin, and then 1/3 to 25% goes into ecosystem companies. So we're very big believers in Bitcoin. Believe it's going to go up several-fold as the friction and adoption and the network effects come into play in Bitcoin. We think it's going to go up several-fold. One of the ways in which it will go up several-fold, and we're all kind of seeing this, is that there's still a lot of friction in the ecosystem. There's friction as a consumer, there's friction as a merchant, there's friction as an institutional investor. And so we've invested in about a dozen companies, companies like ExpressCoin and GoCoin and Kraken and BTC China. And these represent a lot of the on-ramps and off-ramps and bridges, roads, tunnels, whatever you want to call them, to help bring that adoption quicker and easier.
We're going to start treating currency as an application, and in order to do that, we're going to need interfaces that allow us a unified currency experience, that allow us to have a single wallet with perhaps 150 different currencies in it. And because of inventions like sidechains and decentralized exchanges and fluid and liquid systems, and the complete absence of monopoly, of lock-in, of hostage situations around the currency, we will be able to instantaneously and at very low cost convert from Bitcoin to Namecoin to Dogecoin to Ethereum. And if we can do that, then it doesn't matter, because we won't do that. Our unified wallet interface will do that by trying to see what we're trying to achieve with our currency. If I'm buying a house, it might express my transactional will in the modality of Bitcoin, because that's the most suitable currency. When I try to name the domain for that house, it will convert some to Namecoin. The contract itself will be paid for in Ether, and when I tip the bartender for the cup of coffee they gave me when I got up that morning, I'll tip them in Doge. My interface will hide all of these differences. I can see a world in which we can smoothly move between currencies in a multimodal way.
Well, let's be realistic for people outside of this room. Our neighbors, our brothers, our sisters still need an easier way to absorb Bitcoin, to use Bitcoin. We were just in New York last week, and we were in the institutional investor capital of the world. And there's a lot of excitement around Bitcoin. There's a lot of institutional investors, hedge funds, family offices that all want to figure out how to make a play in Bitcoin. And just like for the consumer, it's equally difficult for those institutional investors to put in $1 million or 10 million or 100 million into Bitcoin today because they're fearful of things like jurisdiction, security, and just the general plumbing to get into Bitcoin. So, we see a lot of the deals and the entrepreneurs, the energy and the money going into building out this layer where it's press a button and it just works for Bitcoin, and not really having these discussions around security and cold storage, and it just has to work to a certain degree.
I'm very involved all over the world with Bitcoin-related things, and I've seen just a massive change in the last year. That last year was the real coming to life of Bitcoin. It really started to have an awakening amongst the really smart people, which there isn't a lot, but we're seeing big money moving into Bitcoin now, and this has all happened in the last few months. A year ago, or maybe 2 years ago, the idea of someone having a Bitcoin-related company and someone investing $1 million in it was unheard of. Now it's $10 million, $25 million, it's going to be bigger. There's VC funds starting, there's Bitcoin ETFs, Bitcoin hedge funds. There's so much going on that there's no way this thing can fail at this point unless there's something comes completely out of the blue that I can't even think of, some sort of major failure, which doesn't seem very possible, but it is possible. So from that perspective, when I talk about, people ask me, should I invest in Bitcoins? And I say, well, first of all, it's not an investment, because an investment, you get usually a return, and you can see what you're buying, you have an expected return. It's more of a speculation if you want to speculate, but from my opinion, you don't necessarily need to bet the farm on Bitcoin. You don't have to put all your assets into it, because either Bitcoin's going to zero, which is possible, highly unlikely, I don't expect it at all, or it's going to, in today's dollars, $1 million of Bitcoin if it overtakes all the other fiat currencies. So why bet the farm on it? And so that's what I do. I have less than 5% of my assets in Bitcoin because for those exact reasons. If it goes to zero, then I'm down 5%, and if it goes to $1 million, I'm doing pretty good.
I think you have to differentiate from the so-called, IPO on a coin that Seed Coin and some others have done overseas, with the creation of foundations to issue currency, which are really software sales. You're not actually getting equity in a company. You're getting software sales. Just like, for example, Kickstarter has enabled and Indiegogo has enabled a lot of companies to forego their angel round by selling, right? That's not a venture investment. It doesn't count in venture, but it ends up funding a company through sales. Yeah. And what's happening now with these creation of foundations, which is what we're focusing on in the fund, it's not an equity investment, it's sales, but it acts to the company as a way of being able to then use the money from that sales within the foundation to hire programmers to do all the things you would do. It's a new paradigm that really, I think, is part of what crowdfunding started and now is flourishing in the Bitcoin 2.0 space.
Could that segment be really, really high this year?
Very high.
Very high. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if, and I think the best terminology that I've seen for this is crowd sales. Mm-hmm. So I would echo what Michael said, is people are selling these tokens, and the only function of this token is to access the software. It's literally a password that lets you access that software, and that's a really powerful model in our minds. And so rather than putting money into shares or into startups, we're only taking part in these crowd sales that are really being issued by foundation level protocols and open source.
And the first such crowd sale ever really was Mastercoin, and we led that.
I'm working with the Mastercoin Foundation and Tatiana Moroz to create Tatiana Coin, one of the first so-called crowdfunding coins. And here's how it works. Tatiana wants to raise $100,000 to record her new album and a small tour to support it. The crowdfunding page at first glance looks pretty normal, funding goals and backer rewards. But rather than signing on for a $40 album and t-shirt package, the individual actually receives back $40 worth of Tatiana Coin once the project has successfully funded. It doesn't happen in an ad hoc fashion. These tokens trade on a centralized and decentralized markets, so from the minute the funding is over, the tokens are created and then distributed, the market is valuing them. Because these tokens are only issued in that one batch to support Tatiana's specific project, if the thing you can use them for is something more people want when the project is finished, the album ready to ship, the tour ready to start, then at the beginning, before the album exists, they should be deflationary. And if they're deflationary, early supporters of the project will see the value of those tokens they received in exchange for their donation increase. And so when the rewards are ready, the number of Tatiana coins required to purchase whatever it is they wanted to purchase has gone down. So again, you can sell the remainder, or you can upgrade your package to something that has more value in it. You have a lot of options, and again, that's the point of all of this, is giving people options. Really what we're doing here is creating an ecosystem where people can support Tatiana's music or activism or her other projects and invest in her early, giving her more resources to make a bigger impact than she would have been able to do without that. And these supporters then profit from her success as more people discover her work and also want to support her by holding Tatiana coins, which are either acquired through these fundraisers or via the market, primarily the market with Tatiana coin. A smaller ecosystem like Tatiana coin is valuable because it's a partnership between the funded project and the backers, supporting it where everybody, and the backers supporting it where everybody gets what they want, and the backers aren't trapped by a failing project, but rather spiraling up on a successful project or having the ability to leave a project that isn't working so well for them. And again, the best part about this is that even if everybody abandons the coin, the work continues. The project has already been funded, and it's just if it speculatively delivers, when people think it's not going to deliver, then the people who still believed in the project and held on to those coins will see a very good return for their money. And also people who come in and act as the buyers for people who are panicking about the project, they can profit too. So it creates a market for the future of, it's a futures market basically, on whatever the particular project is, as opposed to not, which is what we have now.
If you look at it on overall, how much investments has gone into Bitcoin companies and cryptocurrency companies? Last year, maybe 100 billion or so.
Yeah, 2013 was a big wake-up call for venture. About $100 million went into the ecosystem.
It's not a whole lot on a relative basis.
It is a pittance. And
why?
if you look, I think 2013 people, when they saw Andreessen Horowitz, when they saw Fred Wilson, when they saw some of the bigger name VCs make a toehold investment, they that next morning they went to their partner meetings and said, we need to figure out Bitcoin. And most of the smart ones locked themselves in a room for a week and said, let's study this. Let's bring in some of the entrepreneurs to come in and pitch us. Let's get up the learning curve in Bitcoin. And so far this first quarter, what was announced and what's been kept private, about $50 million has been deployed. So on a run rate basis, about 100% increase. Still relatively low. I think this year we'll see well over $500 million deployed based on certainly things we see. But this is again just solely in Bitcoin companies, just the infrastructure businesses, let alone the institutional investors that want to put money into Bitcoin, the currency directly, or should I say the property.
And I think
So you can think about Oculus Rift, the prototype virtual reality headgear that was funded on Kickstarter last year. They received millions of dollars worth of support to develop a very speculative project, and not too long ago they were purchased by Facebook for $2 billion worth of cash and stock. And the backers who put in their collective millions for the project got nothing. They got their developer kits, and that was it. My background is heavy in video games, so Oculus was always a really interesting project to me, but I didn't support it because I didn't want a developer kit. And even though I thought it was a really cool project, didn't want the developer kit, didn't want to spend $500 for a developer kit certainly, and so it wasn't really something I was going to do. But again, if there had been a token in play here, and people had been able to just put a token in, then at no cost to the Oculus project, people would have been able to, the value of that coin would have gone up exponentially, because the profile of the project has risen so much, because now it has this gigantic company that is interested in its success and distribution. So again, no cost to the project, major advantage to the backers. So it's really a win-win situation. And because of its major advantage to the backers, you get more backers, because you get people like me who think, oh, this is a great idea, except I don't want the thing.
That there needed to be a piece of plastic that can be used anywhere in the world where you can put a Bitcoin wallet from any wallet into question mark, as they say on South Park with the underwear gnomes, And then on the other side comes out cash in that locality. We have a client on my PR firm, Transform PR side, that I also invested in called Cryptex, that announced earlier this week that they indeed have sort of reached that holy grail, and they basically are going to be shipping in about 4 to 6 weeks, where they go in, they've got a bank in Asia that then goes through a payment network, and then the payment network works at about 50,000 ATMs and merchants all over the world that except the Discover card, and now they're looking at MasterCoin and Visa as well, and that may be rolled out by the time they ship. Obviously in Canada, it's been announced that the CA Vertex is doing something similar for Canadians. That I believe you have to be Canadian, I think it was the CA Vertex is here, but you can use it globally. And then also, there's another card just this week, this is all in 1 week, that announced that they'll be able to do it in Brazilian reals, and they're looking for people going to the World Cup. So that one's been at least off and running, and I think there will be dozens of companies that eventually end up getting into that space. And so that means that one of the big problems of sort of the adoption in the third world, like you want to go and send something to the third world, how do they turn it into cash, is if they have ATM machines, and we were actually had dinner last night with someone from Nigeria, and he said, we don't have ATM machines. So that's another challenge in the villages of Africa that has to be solved. But in the places that have ATMs, in the bigger cities, but not bank accounts, this is a game changer for the third world. And I think that that will help empower a whole new wave of sort of like Western Union competitors, which I think is sort of the next set of 3 things I'm going to start mentioning. So that one's solved.
And Ether is not competing with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not competing with Litecoin. They are all means to express the transactional modality we want to use at any point in time to achieve the goals we want. With this comes a very important and powerful tool. In the choices we make with these currencies, we are also choosing to align ourselves with a community. Adoption is not simply the act of using the currency. It's also attaching oneself to a community that has also chosen to adopt that currency. When I choose to adopt Bitcoin, I am a believer in monetary policy of 21 million total coins as a stable source of value. If I choose to adopt Frycoin, I am a believer in an inflationary basis demurrage coin that has a negative interest rate that enforces consumption and discourages hoarding. I am choosing my politics through my currency. And through that choice, I am associating myself with a global community that has made the same choice as me, and that is expressing that choice through currency. Just like when I choose an application on the internet to communicate with, I'm also aligning myself with the corresponding community. I don't use Twitter just because it's the convenient communication mechanism. I use Twitter because I also agree with many of the concepts and philosophies of the community of other people who choose to use Twitter. But with currency, that choice is a much more powerful political choice. We have entered the realm of metapolitics, of politics by algorithm, of the ability for global communities to form around a common consensus of politics through the choice of currency. You want inflation? Use an inflationary currency. You're a gold bug? Use a deflationary currency. You want a currency that creates a guaranteed minimum income from the poor? Use a currency that expresses that politics. You want a currency that puts aside tokens for carbon sequestration? Use a currency that expresses your green politics. We're going to start seeing communities, politics, and currencies converge and allow us to make these choices. Just like I can support Joey Coin in order to say that Joey is, in fact, the coolest kid among the 5-year-olds. I can support Green Coin because I care about global warming. Or not. Right? I can support Meat Coin if I really, really like red meat. Whatever. Worldwide Wrestling Coin. No problem. There'll be one of those too.
I just have 2 quick questions. So the first one I'll start off with is one of the issues I've heard about with Bitcoin is that sometimes the validation process can be long. So if you're a merchant, and let's use McDonald's for an example. You want to go in, you want to get that hamburger, you want to pay for it, you want to leave right away. It's fast food. Are there any ideas brewing to try and reduce those verification times or validation times? So that's my first question. My second question is, what are the big trends you're seeing in the future? What do you think is going to be the next big game shift in the crypto world as we see it right now?
I'll take the hamburger question. So I don't think in the future that people will use Bitcoin for buying hamburgers. I think that you're going to see either A, they go and load a debit card with crypto, because that works in milliseconds through the established network, and or you're going to have something like Dogecoin or some future coin that is all about small transactions and about speed of processing.
Right. And currently, I would add that most of the merchants address that by doing it with 0 or few confirmations under a certain dollar limit. The odds of fraud, especially at that very low level, are very, very small. And as the hashing power increases of the network, even one confirmation has become very, very secure over time. And as the network grows, it becomes more secure. And so you don't necessarily have to wait for 6 transactions or half an hour, or whatever that would be. So a lot of the merchants are getting around that, but I would agree with Michael. In the future, you'll just have specific coins that will have fast processing.
Currency, in the end, is really a form of language. It's a language by which we communicate our expectations and desires of value. And now that we can do it on such a massive scale, now that everyone can create currency, our choices will really matter. We're past the zero-sum game. This isn't about nation states anymore. This isn't about who adopts Bitcoin first or who adopts cryptocurrencies first, because the internet is adopting cryptocurrencies. And the internet is the world's largest economy. And it is the world's most populous economy. And it is the first transnational economy. And it needs a transnational currency. To summarize, what we've really done is we've inverted the very basic and most fundamental equation of currency, which is that for millennia, until the year 2008, sovereignty defined currency. Sovereignty was the basis upon which currency could be created, and that currency allowed that sovereignty to be expressed. The monopolistic control of currency is the basis of sovereignty. And now the internet has a currency, and the internet is going to use that currency to create sovereignty. After 2008, currency creates sovereignty.
So thanks for watching. Share your views and comments below. Like, favorite, and share the video. And with that, I'll talk to you next time. Take care and embrace life without limits.